Welcome to G Fun Facts Online, where today we're diving into a story that sounds like it's straight out of a horror movie. Imagine a predator so gruesome it eats its victims alive from the inside out. But this isn't a lion or a shark. It's a fly, a metallic blue insect no bigger than your thumbnail that once held the entire American continent in a reign of terror. This is the story of the New World Screwworm and the incredible, audacious plan that brought salvation raining down from the sky. The scientific name for this fly is Cochleomya hominivorax, which literally translates to man-eater, and for good reason. Unlike most flies that are happy to dine on decaying matter, the screwworm is an obligate parasite. This means its larvae absolutely require living tissue to survive. A female screwworm, with her distinct orange eyes and 3 dark stripes on her back, is drawn to any open wound on a warm-blooded animal. It could be a simple scratch from a fence, a tick bite, or the navel of a newborn calf. Once she finds a spot, she lays a cluster of up to 400 eggs. Within 24 hours, those eggs hatch. Tiny maggots emerge, armed with sharp mouth hooks, and they immediately begin to burrow into the healthy flesh of their host. Their feeding motion, a gruesome tearing and burrowing, is what gives the screwworm its name. They literally screw themselves into the wound, making it deeper, wider, and releasing a foul odor of decay that attracts even more female flies. For the animal, it's a waking nightmare. An untreated infestation called myiasis is incredibly painful. The host loses its appetite, becomes immensely stressed, and in just 1 or 2 weeks can be eaten alive. This wasn't some rare occurrence. In the 1950s, the economic toll on the livestock industry was estimated at $200 million a year, which is about $1.8 billion in today's money. In a single 1935 outbreak in Texas, an estimated 180,000 cattle died. Ranch hands spent their days on a grim, stomach-turning task they called doctoring wormies, inspecting animals, physically pulling maggots out of wounds, and slathering on chemical pastes, often in vain. And it wasn't just livestock. Wildlife, pets, and even people were at risk. The very first recorded case of screwworm was from a human sample in 1858. For years, scientists struggled against this plague, until a crucial discovery in 1933 finally identified the screwworm as a unique species, setting the stage for one of the most brilliant ideas in the history of pest control. The battle seemed hopeless. Chemical treatments were just a band-aid on a gushing wound. But in the 1930s, an entomologist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture named Edward Knipling started thinking differently. He had an idea so radical, his bosses initially dismissed it. Knipling had observed a key weakness in his enemy. The female screwworm fly mates only once in her entire life. So he thought, what if you could turn the fly's own reproductive drive against itself? What if you could flood the environment with so many sterile male flies that the wild females would have a much higher chance of mating with one of them? If a female mates with a sterile male, her single shot at reproduction is wasted. She lays infertile eggs, and the next generation of flesh-eating maggots is never born. In theory, if you released enough sterile males, you could wipe out the entire population. This became known as the Sterile Insect Technique, or SITE. But Knipling and his partner, Raymond Bushland, faced 2 massive hurdles. First, how do you raise millions of screwworms? The only known way was on live animals, which was both cruel and impossible for mass production. Bushland spent years on this problem, finally developing a grotesque but effective artificial diet, a slurry of ground meat, beef blood, and water. This breakthrough made it possible to breed flies on an industrial scale. The second challenge was sterilization. How do you make millions of male flies sterile without killing them or making them too weak to compete for mates? The answer came from the dawn of the atomic age. Inspired by research showing X-rays could sterilize fruit flies, Bushland began experimenting. He discovered that a precise dose of radiation, first from X-rays and later from the more efficient cobalt-60 on the screwworm pupae, rendered the emerging adult flies sterile, but left them perfectly healthy, vigorous, and ready to mate. The puzzle was complete. After a small trial on an island off Florida, they were ready for the real test. In 1954, they chose the isolated Caribbean island of Curaçao. They flew in plane loads of sterilized flies from Florida and released them from the air. The results were spectacular. Within a few months, the screwworm was completely gone from the island. The fanciful idea had worked. Armed with this success, the USDA launched a full-scale war. In 1958, a dedicated fly factory opened in Sebring, Florida, capable of producing an astonishing 50 million sterile flies every week. Small planes flew in precise grid patterns, dropping cardboard boxes full of sterilized pupae. Ranchers joined the fight, treating any remaining wounds and collecting samples to monitor progress. The campaign was a massive success. By 1959, the screwworm was declared eradicated from the southeastern United States. The program then moved to the vast landscapes of the Southwest. By 1966, the entire U.S. was declared free of the pest. But the job wasn't done. As long as the fly thrived in Mexico, re-infestation was a constant threat. So in 1972, the U.S. and Mexico launched a joint mission. A new, even bigger fly factory was built in Chiapas, Mexico, eventually producing an incredible 500 million sterile flies per week. For nearly 2 decades, a fleet of aircraft pushed a wave of sterile flies steadily southward. By 1991, all of Mexico was clear. The mission continued through Central America, country by country, until they reached their ultimate goal, establishing a permanent biological barrier at the Darien Gap, the narrow, dense jungle separating Panama and Colombia. Today, a facility in Panama continuously releases sterile flies into that buffer zone, a permanent shield against reinvasion from South America. For decades, the world thought the screwworm was a uniquely American problem, contained to the Western Hemisphere. That illusion was shattered in 1988. The screwworm was discovered in Libya. It was the fly's first ever appearance in the Eastern Hemisphere, and it sent shockwaves across the globe. The warm climate of North Africa was a perfect breeding ground. There were terrifying fears of the pest spreading uncontrollably across Africa, the Middle East, and into Europe, causing an agricultural and ecological catastrophe. An investigation traced the outbreak to imported sheep from South America. The international community mounted an emergency response led by the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization. They knew the only hope was the Sterile Insect Technique, but the only fly factory was thousands of miles away in Mexico. So they hatched an audacious plan, an intercontinental airlift of sterile flies. In a masterpiece of logistical precision, millions of irradiated pupae were flown from Mexico to Libya. An aerial campaign began, dropping over 1 billion sterile flies. Within months, the wild population crashed. By 1991, the screwworm was officially eradicated from the Eastern Hemisphere. The crisis was a stark reminder of how interconnected our world is, but its resolution was a powerful example of global cooperation. The fight, however, is never truly over. The eradication of the screwworm is not a final victory. It's a tenuous peace that requires constant vigilance. The barrier at the Darien Gap is the front line in a perpetual war. And despite this shield, breaches can happen. In 2016, a small outbreak occurred in the Florida Keys, likely from an infested animal. It was quickly eliminated, but it was a warning. And just recently, in 2024 and 2025, a resurgence of the pest in Central America and southern Mexico has caused new alarm, prompting emergency measures to prevent it from re-entering the United States. A new infestation in the U.S. could cost the economy billions. The story of the screwworm is a powerful saga of a terrifying pest brought to heel by human ingenuity. The Sterile Insect Technique, born from this battle, is now used to control other insect pests around the world. But the ongoing threats are a crucial lesson. Eradication is not an endpoint. It's a continuous process. The salvation that falls from the sky, in the form of billions of sterile flies, is a shield that must be perpetually maintained to ensure this gruesome chapter of history is never repeated. Thanks for listening to G Fun Facts Online.